you for the click. My name is Luxley, and on the day before tomorrow, in other words, today, for those of you without your secret decoder ring, we are going to bring you Kemosabe's out there another patch 9.0 Xpac leak. This one is called Whispers of the Dark Ones. Kind of a flaky name, but it's got some good things in it. So we'll take a look in a minute or so. First, I want to point out a few things about these leaks. Let's say someone stole it off of someone's desk at Blizzard, hacked into the computer, knows somebody, bought him a few beers, he divulged what the next, some dev or some secretary divulged what the next Xpac is going to be. A few things you have to keep in mind. One, things can change from the time someone gets a hold of a leak to the time it gets on the internet to the time we actually see it. Things can change at Blizzard, so it might have been legit, 100% legit when it was taken, and then things changed. Two, just because part of it isn't true, and this is something that I can't understand, people don't understand, it's a bit redundant. How is it that if part of the leak isn't true, all of it isn't true? Yeah, half of it could be wrong, 3/4 of it could be wrong, but maybe some of it is right. And the other thing you got to learn about the leak, if someone gets a hold of a leak, they're not getting a tightly knit package with a bow on top of it, like a cinematic we would see at BlizzCon. They're getting something that somehow they're going to have to piece together. And the fact is, we don't know how many other people, once they take a look at something, start to piece things together, start to take a little bit of creative license. We don't know. So those are three things that we need to keep in mind. What I find really interesting about all these leaks is the fact, yes, they are speculation, and speculation is fun. But you know what would be really hysterical? If 10 people all leaked the same exact thing. But instead, in reality, which we all live, or at least most of us do, we get 10 different leaks from 10 different people. And the bottom line is, we know, best case scenario, absolute best case scenario, one leak is right, which means 90% of the leaks are wrong. We all know this is just for fun, but there is a fair chance for a few of the leaks to get a few things right. So we look our fingers, turn the page, and read on. This particular leak, Whispers of the Dark Ones, patch 9.0. The first thing I'm going to do is take a quick look at the lore. We don't have anything on patch 8.3, nothing detailed anyway, and then we're going to go right into patch 9.0 and the Xpac. After we killed N'Zoth, hope I didn't give anything away there, void creatures spawned from his corpse, and they are just as big of a threat as N'Zoth was initially. Bolvar, I love how Bolvar all of a sudden is popping up in all these leaks. Now this is a relatively new leak. This hasn't been something that's been around for weeks or months. Bolvar will offer us his help. He's going to turn some of the champions into Death Knights because, of course, there's the rumor of Death Knights being revamped. Allied races, pandas can be Death Knights, so they have to include this in here. And the reason he's doing this because it makes Death Knights immune against these forces of the void. So I could see that working. That kind of plugs in. It's a square peg in a square hole. Some well-known characters will turn on us, like the Four Horsemen. Gee, what a shock there. Death Knight characters can play double agent with Bolvar's forces, similar to Sylvanas' loyalists. So Blizzard kind of like that plot element. They're sticking with it. I could see that being reasonable. Whispers of the Dark Ones not only refers to N'Zoth's spawn, so that's the whole idea here. This greater spawn of evil, of void creatures pops out of N'Zoth after he's dead, hence the Whispers of the Dark Ones, plural, but also to other entities related to death that are trying to mess around with us around Azeroth. The end of the expansion is still being talked about. You know, when Blizzard talks about things, they just don't get done. I mean, they've been talking about armor dies for a long time, hasn't been done. They've been talking about solo queue for PvP, hasn't been done. They've been talking about 5v5 or 6v6 RBGs, hasn't been done. Talking about something usually has about 3 or 4 or 5 years. Blizzard likes to talk. So basically they're talking about the Lich King being the last boss. Now, anything that delivers Wrath of the Lich King, the sequel, part 2, that nobody really asked for, is a potential disaster. There's a lot of pitfalls here. Or it's a potential great Xpac. So it's like either win big or lose big. with Wrath of the Lich King. And I could see where Blizzard would be very, very desperate with their last breath, their final unclipped claws, clip into the Lich King to make him a reality because they're desperate. They haven't had a new title throughout this whole year. No, WoW Classic doesn't count. Believe me, Blizzard's kicking themselves over not charging money for people to play that. This whole sequel to the Lich King really bothers me because A, it's got a hell of a lot of potential drawbacks, potential pitfalls. B, it shows just how bereft Blizzard is when it comes to new ideas. And C, it's a desperate cling to what worked in the past. Not worked in the sense of game mechanisms clicking and things being fun and exciting. No, it's about what worked in the past as far as what made Blizzard sick money. I could be wrong. Those are just my thoughts. You guys have your thoughts. I really do believe we're going to see some rendition of Wrath of the Lich King in the next Xpac. Whether it's the entire theme of the Xpac or it's patch 9.1 or 9.2. Some of the features, some of the mechanisms here. Whispers of the Dark Ones, new level cap, 130. New continent, the Dragon Isles. This is like the third or fourth Xpac I've run into that mentions the Dragon Isles. So I'm starting to think this might be a reality. New hero class, Dragon Caller. Fights with lances and summons, you guessed it, dragons. Where are my dragons? My Shadow Priest is named after a dragon in Game of Thrones. I like dragons. I would like to see this over a Necromancer and certainly over a Tinker. It sounds interesting, Dragon Caller. It's something different, something new in game as opposed to Necromancer, which is very much like an Unholy DK, or Tinker, which would be new, but it's kind of like the old school engineering profession. So let's go on. Some classes will get a new spec. So they're entertaining a fourth spec here. We're talking a Holy DPS Priest, which is kind of interesting, especially given the undead theme. I think it does fit in, so I could see a need for that. Shaman Tank, which is something that's been long talked about and has had elements of tanking going back into Wrath of the Lich King, TBC, even Vanilla WoW. Fire Death Knight, because someone saw the data mine Fire DK weapon along with the other three Blood, Unholy, and Frost type weapons. And a Blood Mage uses blood constructs as pets, which could be very, very interesting. It could be kind of like maybe a cloth wearer of the old school DPS Blood Death Knight class. That might be something interesting. As far as the allied races go, the Alliance gets the Shaft yet again, and the Horde get two pretty cool allied races. The Alliance get High Elves, which is what we really need in the game. I think every MMO should have 4 different types of elves that you could be. You know, this is the problem. This is the problem here. And I know there are people out there that want High Elves, but the fact is, I don't believe they're a majority. They're just very loud, and they're very evident, and they're very visible. And Blizzard says, this is what the people want. That, my folks, my friends out there, is the main problem. Just because the squeaky tire is screaming doesn't mean you don't have a flat tire in one of the other 3 tires. High Elves? Seriously? And oh, this is even better. Wildhammer Dwarfs, which are not going to be very distinct from regular dwarves, let alone Dark Iron Dwarfs. So yeah, the Alliance gets the Shaft. We get a 4th elf in the game, and we get a 3rd dwarf in the game that looks exactly like regular dwarfs. I can see that being so stupid that Blizzard would do it. Now, for the Horde, Ogres. Now, this makes sense on the Horde side. Ogres. They're going to have basically a Cultiran reskin. And if you kind of look at the mechanics and the animations, it makes sense. I could see that happening. Saberon. Same thing. Very similar animations as the Worgen. Very similar skins as the Worgen. So yes, another race I could see being a reality. And of course, the Horde get the better end of this by tenfold. Profession revamp for the 17th time. I don't know what Blizzard's really thinking when it comes to professions. They've completely made older professions irrelevant. 100% irrelevant. So if you have Wrath of the Lich King level tailoring, or you have Burning Crusade level engineering, the reality is they're useless. There's just really no reason. You've just literally made 80% of the game as far as professions go useless. How about you do something to the effect of letting the professions, meaning the core professions, leatherworking, tailoring, and blacksmithing. Let them create old raid tiers and PvP tiers and put them up for sale on the auction house. And then you have the other professions through a transmute kind of thing, make necessary reagents in order to make those old raid tiers a reality. It's just an idea I'm throwing out there. I think it's good for the game. It's a way of pumping life into older Xpacs for people who've earned it, for people who've put the time in, rather than, okay, you put time in, now it's irrelevant. Make it relevant again, and that's one way you could do it, through cosmetics of old raids. Is anybody really going to complain? You could still go farm Karazhan to your heart's desire, but if you want, you could also craft BC tiers or BC PvP tiers. I think it's a good idea. You guys let me know. But of course, anything that's a good idea is most likely something Blizzard isn't going to do. But we're getting a profession revamp again. So for the 17th time, they're revamping professions. Maybe they'll get it right this time. But usually when you give someone about 4 or 5 chances to get something right, my money's on that they're going to screw it up again the 6th time. Paragon levels, which is just a way of adding more progression into the game. It sounds interesting. That's all it says here. I don't know what they mean by that. It could be a lot of different things. We'll find out more if this is actually real. Customizable spells sounds kind of interesting. I'd like to hear more. I like the broad strokes, but that's all it is. It's just a broad stroke. Customizable spells. I'm sure when I throw that out there, there's something that you think it might be. There's something I think it might be. And we both probably have 2 very different perspectives of what they are. And Blizzard probably has a third completely different perspective. So who knows what that means? But it sounds interesting. It's at least they're thinking on the edge rather than just not thinking at all. Level squish is still being talked about, which means another 3 to 5 years until it gets done. But they haven't found a good way of doing it yet. Revamp cities, which makes absolutely no sense. Anyone can tell you out there who plays an MMO, or more importantly, develops an MMO, anyone can tell you that cities are a waste of an asset. Doesn't matter if you're a fan or a dev of Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14, Star Wars, The Old Republic. It doesn't matter what your MMO flavor of choice is. The fact is, cities are a waste, and to revamp them just absolutely makes no sense. It says that some zones will be revamped. Now, I don't mind the idea of some zones being revamped, because if it's something that is spoon-fed throughout the Xpac in future patches where you're getting more and more new zones, hey, I would sign off on that. If that's what it takes, fine. That's not bad. So we'll see what they mean by some zones will get revamped. Does it mean some zones will get revamped and then we never visit it again? Or is it some zones that is an ongoing process? Ongoing process, I sign off on. Anything else? No. Some old world locations will be revamped. Old world locations, what does that mean? Now you're saying some zones get revamped. Now are you talking Outland? Are you talking Northrend as opposed to the old core zones of Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms? That's what it seems like. It's 2 separate things here. The last point that they make is this revamp will make older expansions relevant again, whatever that means. What does that mean? World quests in the old zones? Does that mean that they're going to tie that into professions, make those relevant again? I really don't know. There's a lot of broad strokes with this. Let's talk about what I really like. Not things that I say, yeah, that's okay. No, really like. Love any new class. Dragoncaller, as they describe it very, very briefly, is something that is different than anything in the game, and I'd sign off on that. The idea of the classes getting a new spec that makes sense to the theme of this Xpac is something I like. I like the new races for the Horde. I despise the new races they propose for the Alliance. And then some of the other broad strokes like customizable spells, Paragon levels, and profession revamp really, really get my interest, but I'm not ready to push all my chips in and say, yup, we're betting on that, because it's just too broad. What I don't like about this is the fact that there's no level squish, there's no commitment to revamp the old world, And without that, doesn't matter what class you're leveling, doesn't matter what race you're playing. If you got to start from level 1 or level 20 or even level 50, you don't want to do it. And you're not going to get people excited about the game. I mean, there are a lot of people currently that have been playing Vanilla WoW, been playing WoW Classic is probably a better way to put it. And these players are stepping up and giving Battle for Azeroth a shot because they could buy it for 20, 30 bucks easily now because it's on sale. And they're giving it a shot. And they're already subscribed. And what experience do they get? The experience they get is leveling through the diluted and absolutely irrelevant zones that are in the Eastern Kingdoms and that are in Kalimdor. It is an absolute terrible way of throwing out a free trial or getting people interested, hooked into the game. It is just absolutely terrible. And that isn't always going to be the first step, but if you had to put your chips down and make a bet, is someone going to start a character from level 1 or level 120 max level? Chances are level 1. And you're not going to experience the best part of the game. You're going to experience the most watered down, diluted, dumbest part of the game. And that's why we need a complete old world revamp with a level squish so we can make leveling great again. I think this one is a bit loony, but it's new. It hasn't been out there for weeks or months, so I thought I'd bring it out there. Someone found it on Fortran. Nothing about the originator of the leak, so that kind of is encouraging as well. My name is Luxley. I'll leave you with this final thought. Whatever it is by you, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night, make it epic.